Back with osmosis, which is going to be dealing with how water moves from one side to the other side of the plasma membrane. Now, osmosis is simply just the diffusion of water, but it's not called the diffusion of water. It is called osmosis, so make sure you remember that. Um, since water is very important in life, it's one of the most important molecules of life, we talk about water separately. Now, the fusion of water is from area of high concentration to area of low concentration. I kind of think of it as like being on the hill. So if you're on top of the hill and you roll down, that would require no energy on your part. And since it requires no energy, it happens quite readily. That is what osmosis is. It goes down the concentration gradient and it requires no energy. Now, when we talk about osmosis, we have to talk about three types of solution: hypertonic, hypotonic, and isotonic solutions. A hypertonic solution, I like to think of it like this. Hypertonic solution, if you took a red blood cell and you placed it into a beaker of hypertonic solution, it says there is less water outside, so you have less water here than here. That means the water is going to move out of the cell. Now, the way I think what will happen here is the cell actually shrinks because in a hypertonic solution, water moves out and the solute moves in, and water molecule moving out causes the cell to get smaller. And the way I remember it is I've never seen a 500-pound hyper person. Most people that you see that are hyper are tiny and skinny. So that's how I remember that it shrinks. Now, the hypotonic solution is one where there is more water actually in the solution than in the cell. So you have the cell and you've got more water here. So that means water is going to move into the cell. As water moves into the cell will swell, swell, swell. And depending on what type of cell it is, might burst or it might become very turgid. That would be a hypotonic solution. For this one, I think of hippo, and the hippopotamus is kind of round, so that means it swells up. The last one's isotonic. Isotonic solution is when you have a cell and there's equals amount of water here, outside, and inside. They're equal. So even though you might have a movement in and out, there's no net movement occurring, and therefore the cell stays basically how it is. Now here's a good picture of each one of them. In the first one here, hypotonic would be like fresh water. And as you can see, water would move into the cell, and that would cause the cell to swell. In an animal cell, it might cause it to be lysed, which means to split, and it would explode. In a plant cell, it would swell, but it wouldn't explode because a plant cell has a very particular structure around it that keeps its shape and is very strong, and that's the cell wall. Now, the isotonic solution, as you can see here in the middle, the isotonic solution, nothing really happens either way. Even though you might have water moving back and forth, there is no net movement. So since there is no net movement, it stays basically how it is. The last one, hypertonic solution, you can see water leaves the cell, and that would cause the cell to shrink. And inside, you would have plasmolysis occur in a plant cell. And we witnessed this in the onion cell when we put salt water to it earlier in the week. Right? Now, let's go through each one of them very briefly, give you a little bit more information. Hypotonic solution, like I said, is when you add fresh water. It would cause the cell to swell. Of course, that is unless you are a paramecium that contains what we want to call a contractile vacuole. That contractile vacuole will squirt water out as fast as it's coming in, as long as it can keep up. The animal cell can live in a hypotonic solution, but in general, animal cells are not. Now remember though, if you have a contractile vacuole, it's going to require ATP of the cell to keep it running. Now in a plant, it's just going to become turgid. Now the hypertonic solution is next, and this would be like adding salt water. In this one, the cell would shrink; it becomes smaller because water would be leaving it. And in a plant cell, you would get what is called plasmolysis, which is a wilting of the cell, which you can see over here in this picture. You see how it kind of pulls away from the cell wall. That is plasmolysis. Okay. The last one is isotonic, and this is when you have no net movement of water at all, even though water may be flowing back and forth across the membrane, and the equilibrium or the cell is said to be in equilibrium. Okay. Now, the last thing I want to talk to you about aquaporins, and they're just simply that these two gentlemen down here at the bottom discovered that there is actually protein channels that help osmosis to occur, and these are called aquaporins. And we'll read an article about these not too long from now, and you'll get some more information. Anyway, I hope this helps you to understand osmosis, and I will talk to you soon.